Sí, sí, grabando, grabando, nos. Sí, sí, grabando, grabando, nos. Sí, sí, grabando, nos. Sí, sí, grabando, nos. Sí, sí, grabando. Sí, sí, grabando, nos. Nos. Sí, sí, grabando. Nos. Sí, sí, grabando, nos.
No, un poco de té, si es posible. Dice que está dulce. No importa, un poquito de té. Gracias, profe.
Frío o caliente.
Me da igual.
A ver, que ahorita es una complicación porque todo tiene que salir ahora. No, tiene que ser la
¿Y qué se quiere que se active?
Si usted lo mete en la plataforma, no sale en el de conferencia.
Bueno, lo que hay que tener en cuenta
Lo
es
único que se hace es que...
Silenciar el usuario suyo en la
o
videoconferencia.
sea, ahora no estamos viendo. Ahora sí, ahora sí. Con la videoconferencia. Ustedes esa parte, está bien.
el tema es que aquellos son más difíciles, no es lo mismo este que está, aquel a la hora de activarlo va a ser más...
No, y si usted lo apagan y después se lo olviden encenderlo,
Y el del está encendido.
el del está apagado.
Sí, pero él lo sabe manejar.
Claro, pero otra persona a lo mejor no
Se le
quiere.
olvida, que nosotros pasa que trabajamos todos los días con la cabina y se nos olvida activar el micrófono y empezamos a hablar.
Ya. Entonces, aquí previmos un radio.
A ver, ahí está Gerardo, está Heidi,
Gracias.
Entonces aquí realmente se pusieron eso.
Joel, está Pedro, ya está la otra muchacha.
Yo siempre traigo esto
Pero
porque pasa.
pusieron entonces esto por eso. Yo en el caso más pequeño y ya cuando tenga una persona pues se sentirá un poco más agradable.
Todo lo que vio.
No, ya, pero de todas formas no está el frío. ¿Tú de verdad no quieres, por ejemplo?
No,
¿Y has seguido pensando en tu canal de cultura? Tu nuevo rol, ¿sí?
sí,
Y esto no soy. Gracias. Muy, eso es importantísimo, gracias.
y el otro día, creo que fue en el noticiero, o en el cultural, no me acuerdo, que hicieron un concurso,
Lo vi también en alguna parte.
sobre todo o sea, lo vi por arriba, pero vi que era más bien, o sea, orientado a los adolescentes y a los niños. Porque
Lo vi en Juventud Rebelde. Yo creo que promovido por el Instituto del Libro.
Sí. Sí, yo lo vi por arriba, estaba en la cocina, pero, o sea, escuché que era...
¿Y tú conoces a Booktuber cubano? No.
No. Eso sí, no.
¿Tú sabes quién sería un Booktuber formidable? Sasha. Francisco López Sasha, ¿lo conoces? Es un escritor, pero que tiene mucha facilidad de palabra, yo se lo voy a proponer a él y que se lo haga a la gente literaria, la parte tecnológica que él no debe saberla. Pero si es una persona joven como tú, tiene mucha más perspectiva.
Sí, claro. Pero sí, lo escuché en la noticia y me llamó la atención. Bueno, no
Tiene que
sabía.
haber algunos, por lo menos. Gracias, hermano. Gracias. No te preocupes, yo pongo el piso. Gracias.
Tenemos la mesita de
No se
¿quiere que le
preocupe.
traiga?
No se preocupe. Yo soy. Yo antes tomaba mucho ron y lo ponía hacia abajo.
No, por eso sí es bueno.
Me da pena.
Un hombre tenerlo en México cuando estábamos en la embajada.
Ah, sí.
Con el poeta.
Con Waldo.
Guarda.
Margarita.
Yo no quiero garantizar.
No, 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 está bien. Bueno, gracias.
¿Alguien así?
Gracias. Gracias.
publicidad. Dice, no.
Lo que pasó
Publicidad y publicidad. La metralleta esa de la televisión comercial que es a 15 minutos. Pero entonces mis cosas son de bien público
Hola.
¿Dónde me siento yo voluntario? Aquí. ¿Y dónde?
Okay, this is the good afternoon, all those two connected to Favors on YouTube.
Vivid activation. ¿Y ese perro?
Ese perro, uno lo
Ah, el perro de
del
esa
mira.
persona.
No.
Espérate, que el micrófono está abierto. Cierra un momentico.
Estoy mirando, déjame ponerme. Estaba en este lado porque hoy fui al Ministerio de Cultura y me lo pusieron aquí y me quedé con eso.
No, yo sé que tú eres hombre.
No la escucho.
Yo estoy viendo una cosa aquí, que estamos hablando a tope de volumen y no están hablando de verdad. Yo me cuestiono de dónde es el audio, porque si no es lo que nos pasó con el micrófono la vez pasada, es que lo que me dijo fue mierda viva, que no quiero que vuelva a pasar. Se mezclaron, no se oía.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a sound test. This is a sound test, and Lydia is by my side here in this sunny afternoon. We are very glad to have Lydia with us this afternoon, and trust me, guys, this is going to be great with Lydia here. And she's been
Looking at the
crap on the internet. Óyeme, ¿qué es eso? What is that? ¿Quién es la vieja esa?
Mira, esa es la importancia de ahorrar para la vejez.
Yo no había leído el. Yo pensé que era una de las viejas esta del este que. Vaya pues.
Esta es la de inglés. Ni la toque, no la vamos a usar.
¿Qué es eso?
Vamos a pasar por ahí.
Mira.
1, 2, brothers. Jim Brother Smith. ¿Qué tal? Entonces, chiquita. Es la pobre.
Entonces, todo lo que vamos a ver.
Lo grabamos y yo lo pedimos todas las volvemos. Vamos a hacerlo así. Se transmite lo que se transmite y se graba también. Sí, decía algunas transmisiones que por favor ya está conectado. Bueno, vamos a marcharnos. Ya vienen los...
Va a salir todo lo que
No, hombre, es mejor que...
Después, ya está abierto, pues no lo veo. Fuego.
Es por la lucecita, tiene una palanquita.
Que cualquier comentario va a salir al mundo, ¿no? Oye, el aire tiene mucho frío, ya se da para que lo oiga al mundo entero. Por eso es que es mejor apagarlo mientras que no se esté usando. Él tiene mucha ganas.
Eso es en caso que funcione la plataforma.
Casi bueno.
Sí, bueno, hemos tenido un grupo de problemas técnicos para comenzar esta tercera sesión, el encuentro, el ciclo de encuentros que hemos estado realizando desde el 17 de agosto bajo el título Cuba en la hora actual. Doy las buenas tardes desde La Habana a todos los que se conectan a través de Facebook, de YouTube, a este panel que busca ofrecer argumentos que permitan desmontar las campañas políticas comunicacionales levantadas contra Cuba en las últimas semanas, convocado por la Casa de las Américas, la Unión de Periodistas de...
This has been summoned by the Union of Journalists of Cuba, the Network in Defense of Humanity, and the Martin Luther King Center, and the Union of Jurists of Cuba, with the support of the Union of Information Technology Engineers of Cuba. This event is entitled Cuba at Present, and we want to take into account the challenges. Cintio Vitier, member of the Orígenes group, titled Martí at Present, Martí en la hora actual. When we name this event, we recall this essay and we pay tribute to the Cuban writer. During this cycle that already had its first and second gatherings on the 17th and 24th of August, we'd like to tackle topics such as the reinforcement of blockade against Cuba and how we have also tackled the COVID-19 pandemic, the measures taken by the national economy, the subversive plans against our country, the disturbances of 11 and 12 of July, the media campaigns against Cuba, and in social media, the role of the Cuban civil society, the community work in vulnerable neighborhoods, and the policies of social inclusion. We are joined in this online forum a group of activists, also people from social movements in the Americas and other parts of the world, panelists that participated in the first cycle. And we have called the third meeting, Participation, Dialogues, Collective Construction of Unity. And for that I have the immense pleasure to be joined this afternoon as members of the panel, Gerardo Hernández Nordello, hero of the Republic of Cuba and national coordinator of the CDRs.
Heidi
Fundora, researcher and professor from Flaxo. Pedro de Laos, Vice President of UNIAC, Coordinator of the Aponte Commission, member of the Government Commission of the Program Against Racism and Racial Discrimination. Joel Suarez, social activist and coordinator of the Martin Luther King Union Center. Claudia Rafael Alba, journalist, member of the network EDG. Yuri Perez Martinez, who should also be online. From Havana University, yes, we can see Yuri, member of the National Board of the Cuban Society of Constitutional Law, and also from the Union of Jurists of Cuba, and Manolo de los Santos. I think Manolo is online. Yes, I can see. He's the executive coordinator of the People's Forum and researcher in Tricontinental Institute of Social Research. I am the vice president of the House of the Americas, and I will be the moderator of this gathering, of this online forum. Each of the speakers will have 10 minutes to make their presentation as they speak through the YouTube chat and through the different websites. You can make comments or questions. And those who are in the online forum through the chat of the Gypsy online chat, well, you can issue your questions so that we can share afterwards with the members of the panel. So we will have 5 minutes to respond to your questions or comments. And in the end, they will have 2-3 minutes for their closing remarks. We are broadcasting through the YouTube channel, Resumen Latinoamericano, also in English through the YouTube channel, The People's Forum, and I would like to thank them for their support. Today, we have more members in this panel, and we don't want to waste a single minute. I would like to give the floor to Gerardo Hernández Nordelo. We have seen him over the last few months engaging in dialogue with the different members of the neighborhoods, and he knows very well how far the hatred of the enemies of the revolution can go. We're pleased to have Gerardo with us. Thank you. First and foremost, greetings to the people who are on this side in Cuba, and also to those who are in other countries of the world following this forum. It's very important to greet the organizers of this event because of the importance that it has in the midst of such a brutal campaign. And I will talk in plural also, because there are many campaigns against the Cuban Revolution. We're also talking about the neighborhoods and the community issues. A couple of minutes ago, we returned from one of the neighborhoods with, out of the 62 neighborhoods where we are working. We work in La Timba neighborhood this morning. And first, I would like to say that there's this campaign of lies and slanders is so brutal that in our case, we thought that when the files were released in 2014, I would never be quoted against in the New York Times, and I never thought are going to be again in New York Times as someone opposing to Cuban government in a parade in Havana. And this was the case in the New York Times. But it happened also in many other media, printed and both digital. So people who were allegedly in demonstration against the Cuban government, this is a very gross manipulation. And now getting back to the neighborhoods and what we're doing in the neighborhoods, there is a crass crisis when it comes to lack of information. I would like to say to you first that the work that we're conducting at present in 62 neighborhoods of the capital city, and that we're also covering other neighborhoods in the island, is not just being done because of what happened in July. If you take a look at the documents of the Congress of the party, you see the outlook and the forecasts, and you see that everything was very established in the neighborhoods. Now, certainly, in communities, I'm sure you've seen some images and pictures. We have to acknowledge first the problems that we have. And of course, these are problems that exceed at least 62 communities, 62 neighborhoods in the capital city, and other neighborhoods in the rest of Cuba. There are people living under conditions that are not the most adequate ones. So this revolution was not made. So there are people living under those conditions. This is the truth. It's a sad and painful truth, but this is our truth. So when you take a look at a reality like this one, you cannot step aside from some facts. This revolution did not triumph with a magic wand on the hands and to say all the marginal neighborhoods may disappear. and all of a sudden they're going to become residential neighborhoods. This is science fiction. We have had to work very hard. This revolution triumphed in 1959, and since 62 we were already under the brutal blockade of the United States. Another reality that we have to highlight is what I have just said. We are different nuances because there are many modern neighborhoods where were radically transformed by the revolution, and over time many of the works have been delayed when it comes to maintenance, but we're not discovering these right now. This marginal neighborhood with social problems is not that we are seeing these for the first time. We're not discovering these for the first time. There are other realities that have to be tackled. We just returned from La Timba neighborhood, and in that neighborhood, what it happens is that houses were built for some of these people in certain years of the revolution. The revolution built houses, but the mistake was made to build these houses for these people, and the other were not eradicated. So there are people who moved into the new houses, and the other houses, were occupied by other people. So, and there were erroneous policies. People moved out of their previous home to new apartments, but the old houses were not demolished, and there are many relatives of these people, and the problem was multiplied. These are realities that is good to also bring to your attention, because when we don't have the possibility and the lack of information against Cuba, since it is not possible what is what can be denied, what happened in the neighborhood, there are certain opinions issued. They're saying they're doing that because of what happened in July, because they're discovering the problems now. We have been working for a long time, but we cannot deny that there are problems, that most of these problems have to do with the brutal blockade imposed on us, and we have not been able to breathe for over a century. And this is part of the plan to generate problems, to let's say generate a social explosion. But what's happening in the neighborhoods, as you all know, as we just mentioned, there are 62 neighborhoods in Havana where we are working. We have appointed a ministry to coordinate the works in each neighborhood. In La Guinera neighborhood, or in other neighborhoods also, we have the Ministry of Construction. In Plaza Municipality, we see the Ministry of Communication. In Habana del Este, we have Cuba ministry. There are ministries coordinating the works in each of these neighborhoods. There are also cadres from the party to coordinate this work. There's also a representative of each of the mass organizations, including our organization. There's a cadre who is on a permanent basis coordinating these works in different neighborhoods, but there are people who are channeling their complaints. There are complaints that did not find a solution over the last years, and this is being coordinated. And we have students, youth from the Young Communist League, youth from different movements. There are many projects of people who say, I'm not a university student, or I'm not a member of the Youth Communist League, but I want to meet with several people. And there are many community projects that have emerged to reach out to the different neighborhoods and to say, what do we do? What do you want us to do? So there is important movement of people who want to contribute. And when you go to these neighborhoods, well, you can see a positive environment. This we have insisted on the need not to create false expectations to the population. We cannot say everything is going to be solved. We want to insist. It's not that we have more resources now to solve the problems. We're making an extra effort with the same limited resources, with the same blockade that far from getting, say, a break under these times of pandemic. That empire that is so humanitarian, between quotations, have tried to suffocate the Cuban Revolution for over half a century, and they're concerned about human rights. But far from this, well, there should be saying we're facing a pandemic. This is not a time to suffocate Cuba. This is time for unity. We're going to give them a break. We're going to, let's say, while the pandemic lasts, we're going to, let's say, soften this blockade. Let's lift some measures that affect the people directly, and let's do this and that to improve the. Far from that, they have done the country. We've seen a reinforcement of the blockade, and what they want is the Cuban people to surrender. They do not want to endure these needs, and their, let's say, problems are the ones that emerge and in Cuba, and they have been betting on that for many years, and our people knows about that. But the work in the communities is being led by the party, is going to be led by the mass organizations, by the neighbors themselves are the ones who are conducting the work. At least this is our aim. There are places, and we see that the neighbors at hand in hand are working in these projects. They're young, strong people who are just sitting and looking at other people. If you live here, how come you are sitting here and there are other people working for you? How do you think that people from outside are going to come here to solve our problems? So we have been insisting on that. This is not an intervention in the communities. So we want to reach out and to structure and to guide, but this is not an intervention. This is a mistake that some people have committed. We have had a very good will, and we have reached out to the community, and let's say we're going to build a park, and we have invested the resources, while perhaps we had asked the community leaders, that we have said that more important than the park, what we need is a canal so that the water can flow. This is a mistake that we should not make again, and it has happened in several places. We, as members of the organization, have been around these communities, and people are aware of this at the community level, that the accumulated problems cannot be solved overnight in the midst of the blockade, but people are willing and ready to work. Thank you, Gerardo, for your comments.
Of course, you were saying this, and the Cuban president have said this in many different occasions. We have the presence of the mass media following these transformations, and this is not about an intervention. It's just about listen to the needs, and what you were saying, the needs of the people, the dwellers of a place. Not giving continuity to the analysis of the problems and trying to see what is happening so that we can solve the situation. I would like Heidi Fundora, researcher and professor of social sciences faculty related to Latin American studies, to give her opinions about this. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the possibility to be able to share these ideas with people who are trying to build our society. One of the ideas we are spreading in this social sciences faculty is something related to a complex issue, which is one of the reasons, one of the causes of what has happened. But the work we are doing in the Latin American social sciences faculty shows that this is not that this is something that have been taken care of since many years ago, from the academy, from the community development sectors, and we have been dealing with inequities as well as with the organization ways in the communities so we can deal with those inequities. Those are issues I wanted to tackle here in a brief manner, just to analyze one of the challenges we are having ahead. We say that because of the research we have been doing, we can find we have a gap of gender, and it means that in the year 2020, the statistics that were published, women represented 21% of the people working in cooperatives and 28% of self-employed people. If we analyze what was assessed in the last census, we were able to see some challenges, like the fact that white people are overrepresented in 10%, and brown people are in self-employed work, while black people are underrepresented in 13% as landowners. Mestizos or mulattoes were overrepresented as people taking care of their relatives but not receiving any payment for that. This is one part of the information we were able to gather in all these analyses, and those are issues we have to take care of. The important or interesting thing about this participation process is that we have been that from the municipalities, from the civil society, we are creating new systems, new plans to analyze social inequities. But those are challenges we have identified in our studies, in our assessments. And one of the ones we have found is that not everyone is participating the same way in the diagnostics about inequities, social inequities. So that is an obstacle in finding out which are the main difficulties we have, the real ones we have. So we have to analyze the inequities related to age, to physical disabilities, and so on, and as well as we do when we analyze gender, migration inequities, and the Cuban Academy, as well as the work we do with Martin Luther King and the Nicolas Guillen associations help us to analyze these gaps. Another important and interesting element is that when we analyze the reasons of those inequities, we see that the analysis is centralized in seeing the employment structure, for instance, as well as the participation. But participation is analyzed as not a fundamental cause, as analyzing causes of inequities. And something else we wanted to share, and this is a challenge, it's related to different views on which are the best formulas in the context of a Cuban Revolution to solve these inequities, and then we have different opinions in these regards. Some public servers are working as well as decision makers, and we see differences when we prioritize the participation in local areas by people who make decisions, in decision makers, more than in those who work in solving the problems, and more in women than in men. So this scenario, which is already a challenge per se on having a consensus on what kind of difficulties we have, which are the causes, the reasons of the inequities, and how to solve them, is something we have been analyzing for many years now in different contexts with technical and scientific approaches. And then I wanted to connect all this with some other issues, because as we said, we deal not only with inequities but also with the fact that how people have organized as society to be able to deal with this complex matter. And then we find different elements in this sense. And one of those is that when we work with the spaces which are designed from the people's power level, with the community levels, we find that all the potential is not properly used, is underused to analyze the inequities. And it is also related to the event that the rhetoric which is used is related to equalitarianism, as well as with the lack of possibilities of working with specific inequities. And in these traditional spaces, we have a participation to find this. And we need to have more opinions, more traditional work. And this is a way we can find to analyze the potential of these topics. And many times there are academic communities that consider that inequities are solved with strong technical components, but we need also the participation of the people, we believe, for solving these matters. More than taking a look at this traditional context, another important element we have explored is that in these traditional spaces we find these mistakes or errors. We have to see which are the analysis of the Cuban society is about these topics. In the communities we have analyzed, we can see complementary spaces that have appeared after the local and community projects, but also after some changes that have been introduced from the political policies and the institutional design in Cuba. One of those that speak the most about community problems is the municipal strategies for development. And the community is analyzed from the development viewpoint, and then we're able to analyze inequities and vulnerabilities. And also in the design we have considered the participation of a population in building strategy. So we are trying to find the problem of deficit, but also we are trying to have comprehensive development plans. And this issue led us to have some other programs and possibilities at local level, and we were able to see a number of programs like PRODEL, the program for local agricultural development, the biomass, and programs as well as cultural programs. And we have been also supported by different entities and in different municipal entities. We have seen the participation of universities in different municipalities, the participation of the population. So we are able to analyze the vulnerabilities and the development strategies. And in this space, this capacity of having new ideas lead us to important solutions in the analysis of these topics, and also some other new challenges appeared as the important participation in the advisory work for universities. But in the case of people who were disadvantaged, we were working with them. When we were trying to analyze this development in municipalities, the participation was quite different. So those are elements to be debated with this part of the society. And then I wouldn't like really too much time in my first part of the speech. And last thing I would like to tackle is an important potential to be able to have innovation in the development of participatory processes. So we went from traditional spaces, then we went to these recreational spaces in local development, and now we are dealing with plans, projects, programs for human development, social equity, human development indeed, to be able to think about the solution to inequities. And if we analyze programs which are developed, when we include racial discrimination as well as discrimination against women, and some life projects, access to services, social prevention, and special attention to vulnerable people, we are seeing a potential space to activate in all these community projects, all these community initiatives, so they can have some dialogue with municipal strategies makers as well as with other entities that are important in building the public policies to deal with inequities. And we, of course, have to include workers that consider these community initiatives, this work developed in communities, working together with educators all. And when thinking about habitat, we have to consider Mata Verde group, and then we have great level of creativity to analyze the public policies related to inequities, and those are important, and potential spaces to rethink about these proposals, consider the participation of all social sectors.
What you said, because you have named government programs that are articulated in a very important way under the new Cuban Constitution for this improvement of living conditions. And I think that the vision that you shared is very interesting. There are many good practices that should be analyzed and implemented in other spaces so that we can try to replicate these projects. It's important to readdress this. You talk about inequalities, so it's important to have with us Pedro de Laos. He's vice president of UNIAC. He's one of the most brilliant journalists here in Cuba, with a long-standing work also in the field of music. And he's the head of the Aponte Commission. He's the part of the program against racism. What is the Aponte Commission, Pedro? And how do you see the participation of this commission in the fight against racism in Cuba? Greetings to all of you who are in line with us. I'd like to greet my colleagues of the panel. The Aponte Commission was created in UNIAC. UNIAC, what is UNIAC? The Union of Writers and Artists from Cuba. It was created in this organization called UNIAC several years ago, in 2009. It was created to fight against discrimination, racial discrimination and races, but it came, of course, from somewhere. And this is part of a long process of debate and denunciation of the problems and the persistence of racism in Cuba, of discrimination attitudes, and how this problem was not totally solved. And someone I recall vividly, and I'm sure my colleagues will remember him, the former president of UNIAC at the time, Abel Prieto, how this was discussed. And in the end, in '98, it was part of a UNIAC Congress where actor Tito Junco and others, Rodriguez, Elvira Cervera, and other actors, they talked from the cultural outlook. They raised problems having to do with the persistence of racism, and how Fidel also talked about objective discrimination, objective factors within discrimination, and the subjective factors as well. And it was a mistake to think that just because egalitarian policies, just to call them equal and to defend unity that's so important when it comes to the people, we had delay in time a critical look at these problems. UNIAC harbored a project called Cuban Color that was a lot of catharsis within this project. It was also positive at that time until the Aponte Commission was created in 2009. The Aponte Commission was created in Havana and also in all provinces of the country. And there's another stage of the Aponte Commission was passing through different stages, and finally, due to its own experience and other experiences from the anti-racism program, and also academic experiences as the one put forward by my colleague here, the professor, and there was enough experience accumulated and people's wisdom to take a step forward, and it was taken by the government. They created in 2019 the National Program Against Racism and Racial Discrimination. It is not by mere chance that it was launched by the president. As Vice President of the Council of Ministers and the Council of States in the past, he had a dialogue with the Aponte Commission from UNIAC. I want to make clear also, Joel, you asked me to clarify the name of UNIAC. I would like to highlight the Jose Antonio Aponte is one of the forerunners of abolitionism and independence in Cuba. And he was beheaded in a conspiracy in rebellion in 1812, and he was beheaded. And to show the public, and it was shown in Velascoain Street in Havana. It was such a stigma, and one of the practices of racism, and still persists in a way. There was a phrase that was used here when they want to say that someone was worse, and they said someone was worse than a ponte. You can recall that very well. The program has a different outlook, and a very thorough diagnosis was conducted, and I think the success of the program, is that we have gone from diagnosis and we have moved into action. They has conducted, this is an ongoing program, of course, an ongoing building of these dynamics, and we see taking into account the factors that have to do with the survival of racism, and they are at the basis of the program. The diagnosis took into account the contributions of the social sciences, the abundant statistics from different sources, also opinions issued by different organizations, and the criteria from experts and intellectuals. This is a comprehensive look at cross-cutting issues in the Cuban society. And to finally eradicate poverty, they follow measures adopted based on scientific foundations and ideologies as the ones we are profiling now. And we do not want to go around, but we want to base on work on scientific knowledge. Although they might have objective factors, they consider that a cultural change is required. First, because races do not exist. We only have one human race. And they talk about race, white or black race, but let's say human race is only one. And we have seen the role of the artistic movement under UNIAC and also anti-racism activists that have worked for decades. Because unfortunately, there has been a ground where the enemy has taken advantage of it, and they have been working in a very insidious way. They have paid alleged black activists to denounce different issues. And these small groups that have been emerging over the last few years, mostly after the crisis in the 90s, these small groups have to do with human rights, etc. If you notice this, 3 or 4 out of 5 leaders of these small groups are black or mulatto. It's not by mere chance. It has been a choice, and they have been betting on that. And it's self-evident, and also to generate context that generate false matrices on the situation of race in Cuba. And it was in the New York Congress in '98 when a frank dialogue was established with Fidel, and UNIAC participated in this systematic exchange during the last decade. And UNIAC is the one that interacts with the Ministry of Culture and also with the Fernando Ortiz and Nicolas Foundations, and work with different groups both in Havana and other provinces to tackle this issue and to implement these policies. In short, the UNIAC and Aponte Commission is one of the 18th organizations of the Cuban civil society, and we want to vindicate this, and I'm sure Joel will talk about this, the importance about socialist civil society in Cuba. That is quite important. It's more numerous than what people think. And this is a pillar of the program. Now, the current situation. This did not emerge after July 11th. This was present long before. In the midst of the difficult circumstances that the country is undergoing, we want to promote the objectives and the scope of the program. We want to create awareness about the causes of this problem while we work for or against prejudices present in Cuban society at present. All these we counted on the experience of activists and scientists, and we also want to listen what is happening on the street. No manipulation of the problem as proposed by the ones who are addressing this from the United States. They say that discrimination and racism are topics that exist among us. And for blacks and mulatto, the revolution has had no answer. This is a slander that cannot be allowed. There's many social disadvantages. There's vulnerability. We admit there's a social debt by the revolution that has been worsened over the last few years due to the blockade. We could have made more progress if the International Bank will allow us to engage in business with them, normal relations with them, but that's not the case. But it is true, it is acknowledged that the revolution has advanced more than ever, and they failed of dignity of black and mulattoes and to defend this issue. But of course there are standing issues that remain to be solved, and I have many proof of this. So I'm willing, if you have questions about these or comments, because we're making progress in this regard, and we could do this faster than people think. My colleague knows this very well because she has cooperated with us and she has been part of that program and the design of that program. And on the one hand, this is coordinated by the government, but there is also a team by the Ministry of Culture, and it is indispensable and it's self-evident the participation of the civil society. And we have not only the participation of UNIAC, but also Nicolas Guillen Foundation and others, and activists at the neighborhood. The Afro-Descendant League, yes, we are also in the neighborhoods. We have also in Matanzas province, in Santiago de Cuba provinces, there allies as the House of the Caribbean, in a festival like the Festival of the Caribbean we have never seen before. So well positioned this problem of the legacy of the African cultures and the search for social policies that can raise self-esteem and they empower these sectors, as has been done in Santiago de Cuba province with the work of the House of the Caribbean and the ideas raised by Joel Jens. And the last thing I want to say is I want to thank a movement from the United States that has supported us also. It's Black Lives Matter. Greetings to them and to Manolo, who has had a lot to do with these statements has raised, and this is a source of encouragement for us.
Bueno, de alguna manera esa articulación.
One way or another, this articulation is an experience that are happening in the neighborhoods, and this is happening in different contexts and in different realities. And the experience of Martin Luther King Center is crucial when analyzing the participation of the people in the neighborhoods, of the local dwellers, and even the process of formation. So I would like to give the floor now to Joel Suarez, who is an activist from the center. Well, my greetings to many of the people who are in the screens, and many people who are following us through Facebook and YouTube. I be in debt with hundreds of people who are part of what we call a family in movement. Not only the 100 associates to Martin Luther King Center, but also this international center or movement, which is organized in different areas in the country through the ecumenic Fe por Cuba network and some other networks. And there is this political will to go to the neighborhoods to analyze the problems which are existing, and these very complex issues like habitat and collective habitat, as well as housing problems. Many of them were already working, trying to contribute with materials, as well as contributing with the dimension which is related to the transformation of a people and the social and cultural work. People from Martin Luther King and many other people who were participating since many years ago. So, leaving apart my debt, I would like to speak about some problems and some issues related to the facing the pandemic task. And this is a common challenge we have today, and that is related to the issues about recreation of the hegemonic character of the revolutionary projects, and the main features of these changes of the revolution in these difficult moments which are present in our groups as well as in Latin American development groups. The Cuban situation might be adverse in the challenges, and we were talking about that in the first forum. This is a brutal kind of war which is trying to establish a discipline of the Cuban people who is so bold of having a revolution so close to that country. So we were in the prior forum about the economic situation we have in Cuba, which is so complex, so much complex, because we have many factors which I'm not going to mention at this point. And then we are to add to this situation the times we are going through, which is an extension of capitalism and the control of production and cultural efforts, and this cultural homogenization from the imperialism that is reaching many different groups of the population in the whole world. We, of course, are part of this whole number of problems, and we have a media ecosystemic situation where networks and social networks play the same role that they play in some other countries in trying to create new ideas, life sense of many social groups, and they play an important and new role in the production of policies. In my opinion, it is fundamental, as we have done here since Gerardo started talking about the most serious and accumulated problems we have in our communities due to different reasons, And of course, we had to go to the neighborhoods to face the present situation. We have as well to recognize other problems that have been mentioned associated to inequity, problems related to age, to gender, to races, as well as problems related to the existence of a cultural problem by racism. And it's important to our sisters and brothers following us this afternoon might know about the determination of the leadership of the country to exercise a permanent contact with the people, which is limited, very much limited because of the pandemic, but it might be substituted by these kind of dialogues that is taking place, all of us keeping distance, not to contaminate our Prieto, but also the possibility to have these views which are not new and that were present in the Cuban Revolution in the person of Fidel Castro, which is analyzing things in a very crude, in a very realistic manner. The second thing is that we are sons and daughters of the tradition to change, to turn defeats into victories, to see the memories of that important man who was Fidel Castro. He is, thinking about his gifts, and he was a master of adversities since the early times of the attack to the Moncada garrison, which is not recalled as a failure. We just remember those who died in the attack to the Moncada garrison, but there was a defeat that was turned into a victory, as it happened with Alegría de Pío combat, the missiles, the crisis, as well as other problems we have been facing in Cuba. We are not accepting any other condition as revolutionaries, either Marxists or Marx followers or not. We believe that the important events are decisive in creating awareness and in putting together many different people. And this task, we also give our determination to keep on fighting. The Cuban Revolution brought some cultural changes in different areas, but there is one which is fundamental. Let me put this paper away because I have to improvise. So we can say that human condition is important. Many people were talking about their aspirations. They put an end to their marriages in some cases because they devoted their lives to fight for socialism in Cuba, and that created an anti-imperialist culture and this call for solidarity, which is still crucial even at present times. This might be even bad to recall other times which are even worse than the special economic period. Remember those times in where we were eating just eggs, rice, and poor food, because we have been going to different, very difficult times. But we have to acknowledge that we all are daughters and sons of these 30 years, and the features that were produced by socialism up to the 1990s have been eroded and have been reduced in the fundamental features, even in equity or equality. So it's fundamental for us to be aware, and I'll be very bold by quoting Fernando Martinez Heredia, that erosion produced by socialism in the essential features and other factors have produced something that we have to recognize, which is a cultural line which is apart, which is away from the revolution. And it's important when Fernando says which is away, it's more complicated than saying it's against the revolution, because there is a reaction in this case. When they talk about this separation, he is talking about a group of people and their motivations, their relations, their aspirations, and their relation is to be distant, to be far. And this is expressed as a metaphor when we unfortunately find some citizens that have substituted the plural us by the them when they speak about governmental institutions, and when they speak about political institutions, even when they speak about the leadership of the revolution. This also is impacted by some issues that were mentioned by Gerardo and by the president in some of his speeches, and it is when some people are following bureaucratic methods, and then the population are really upset and tense, and most of all because our projects and our struggle still is following a equation, and Fidel was able to contribute in a huge manner about with the different institutions. So if you're really pissed off and you are angry and mad at different entities, you are able to have some political reaction. And I believe that there have been some reaction during the events of July the 11th. Some people might be delinquents or not, but their actions were not related to the projects of the revolution. That was related to the abandonment and these ideas of going against the process. This made me think about the necessity of innovation in the Cuban civil society, like CDRs and the Women's Federation of some other entities that appeared after the triumph of the revolution, dealing with different topics or matters, just because they want to be able to be registered in the association's registry. We have to achieve and to have some gathering kind of organizations to lead all this potential and organized energy favoring our project. And we need to put the neighborhood and the simple people and the common people in the Constitution, and this Constitution should be properly analyzed and implemented so that organizations, organized groups, neighborhoods, common people might take advantage of a potential of the Constitution to exercise a participation and the people's control. And that is where we have to be efficient and where we have to be revolutionary and to be able to create rules, mechanisms, spaces for executing this participation and the people's control. And with the participation of municipalities, we have to achieve not only the a manifestation of what is happening in the neighborhood seen in the Constitution, but also to have an entity to be autonomous enough and to be able to have efficient mechanisms so that people feel part and feel in control. And this is just an old revolutionary task that supports the idea that socialism is the socialization of power and the socialization of means of production. And then we have to establish this content, which is fundamental in the revolution, mainly during the times of the pandemic, which was the main tool used by Fidel. That is the mobilization, the protagonic role played by the people, mainly, as Gerardo said, in the work which is related to management, to things that impact the communities in a direct manner, because that's have some direct influence in their lives, and also those issues which are totally negative. If we have welfare, well-being in the population, we can have the consensus and the hegemonic condition of these people's processes, and this is important. But if we have people are not feeling well, and they see that we are not able to mobilize the population for them to contribute with the project, people might be divided, and then we have to recreate, which was fundamental for the Cuban Revolution, and that is that happiness, my happiness, Gerardo's, Pedro's, Heidi's, and Claudia's, and Joel's happiness. It's important, and it's also a contribution to the collective happiness. So we have a central criteria of a project that no matter how many states it might have, the main purpose of it, and even during pandemic times, the main purpose is the happy life of human beings.
Thank you. I would like to thank Chema Sanchez, who was a member of the panel of the first meeting, which is broadcasting from Europe, from her wonderful channel, and she has made great contributions. And now I would like to give the floor to Claudia Rafaela Alba Ortiz. She's a journalist. She's a member of the network Defense Against Humanity, and she has different experiences having to do with communication at the community level. And it's important to think about Cuba today, our diversity, and the challenges that are faced at the rural level, the dimension of the archipelago in general terms. Thank you for this opportunity. Yes, quite often when it comes to dissemination of knowledge and experiences, we only remain at the urban centers because there's no connection that is still efficient within the rural contexts and many other things that take place at the level of presentation of knowledge, dissemination of knowledge. So quite often this link is not created. It doesn't mean that in those places there are things that are happening. So what I want to share with you today has to do with people's communication at a community level. In other countries is known as participatory community, democratic communication, horizontal communication, or free communication also. I think it's a great name for it. And secondly, I'll refer to experiences of solidarity, people's economy, and the way they have worked during the pandemic. That is taking place in not rural and rural contexts, but is under, of course, the World Women's Parade. And then we will have also a second round. Others, we will identify them. So collecting these experiences is being very positive today, and it's an indication of what is being done in the rest of the country. I'm from Baracoa in Guantanamo province. That's why I want to address this issue. issue. The first experience related to communication is that many of the campaigns against Cuba, they talk about a political gap in everyday life. And they say that behind these processes and projects and initiatives, but quite often there's an ethical subject trained during the revolution that is making that possible, that is accompanying all that, and this is forgotten. And it's a subject who is promoting these, but it's also accompanying these actions because, for example, as part of the fact that from activists, female activists movements, they may be criticized because everything can be improved. When we go to the rural communities, we realize the only thing that reaches out to this community is for example, the centers to provide guidance to the family. And the way they're designed, they have a capillary structure that goes throughout the country. Here in Havana, we do a lot of things. So we want to do a lot of things, and we can assist them from the operational standpoint. We can assist a reduced number of people. Those organizations with a structure in place, they reach out to places that no matter how hard I try, I cannot reach. And if I do, I will do this from an urban-centered perspective. And this is complicated. Doesn't mean they are working well in all places. But in those spaces, they're working. And it's important to recall the political dimension of this. I'm talking about the institutions between quotations. It has a political meaning within the Cuban social project and within socialism. The movements of voluntary correspondence, that is, works also in Guantanamo, in Baracoa, this emerged because the radio station has 16 hours of broadcasting and a reduced number of journalists, and they do not have enough space to cover all this. In the past, they were not communication professional, and the decision was made to create a network of correspondence that was died out when we understood or began understanding communication from a more sophisticated perspective. But automatically, it had to be recovered. And we had to recover this because the municipality felt during 5 years the change of the radio station, because they were the ones who were conducting this broadcasting, and there were other people who were graduates from the academia, but they cannot always communicate that people understand or people feel represented. And so, specifically, after 5 years of this experience, the voluntary correspondents are people who live in the community, who are linked to institutions. What they do is to report information to the radio station as reporters. Some do reporters work, but with all this process of decentralization of the management of the municipalities and the different places, communication is indispensable to accompany this process when they talk about local development. But when it comes to determining what type of communication we're going to implement, it's indispensable, because the mass media do not reflect the reality. They build the reality. And this is reserved for the thinking of a few people. So the mass media will remain the representation of reality of a few, and they will have the privilege of a few that, because since they are there, they can be represented in a way. 5 years later, among the results, we say for 40 years the radio station did not have a sports section, and 4 voluntary correspondents, even a security agent from the Institute of Sports, He's a coordinator. He has been working for many years in this sports institute. He knows very well about statistics and sports. In 4 years, I have created a show of 2 hours, and they usually record in the order. In the past, they had a problem with transformation. They only had a motorcycle to move around, and they could not reach out to rural communities. And sometimes they transport by themselves, and sometimes people just want to report. So journalists, they're journalists in the isolated communities who can report about these issues. And a specific case of this sports show, when they record in a given community, this is a major event for them, because they conduct the sports festivals at the community level. The cultural authorities make contributions. They exhibit different dishes or dances, and it has been having a great impact. The radio station has managed to conduct 4 training courses for voluntary reporters. We see the political will of the municipality that is also present. When it comes to economic management, it's not so much, because the municipal media, they do not have many resources. But when it comes to self-management, perhaps they can manage this, because sometimes we see a precarious situation when it comes to the labor force. And we still have a number of staff who are employed by the station, and the radio authorities have had a say in. There are 2 journalists who work in the coordination, and there are over 20 voluntary respondents, and also children correspondents, and also part of the intention of the radio station. I mean, the only professional staff they have is the director of the show and the sound recorder. But when it comes to production, scripts, this is conducted by the voluntary reporters, and the radio station wants to continue engaging people in these activities. So people who want to approach the mass media, because the mass media, they're a tool of participation where they can exercise citizenship. Media citizenship is a way of feedback when it comes to the management, public management, and people. And the second project, in the International Women Parade, they made a mapping of solidarity, people's economy, taking into account female economy, while they were, at some point, they wanted to reach out to this stage, their experiences in the field of the program of the investment of women. There were a number of centers for women to wash the clothes, of laundromats, many initiatives from the cultural level that also had to do with family agriculture, where urban agriculture, and they're selling at solidarity prices. They're donating certain products they support with different processes. Many of the women who are organized, they own their own productions. They were able to wash the clothes, to sew, and during the pandemic, they began assisting the production and of different items. For a while, I was close to a community in Baracoa. It's called Kivihang. They have no electricity. They do not have fixed line, and they have a woman who has permaculture. She has been working there for 3 years. It's a beautiful place. And the work that she generates, the posts that she generates, and she employs mostly young women because there are less jobs in that possibility, because the forestry companies have jobs for people who want to cut down pine trees, but this is not for women. But they usually say that's for men, not for women. And in the field of agriculture, and she mostly employs young women, and she also teaches people how to preserve food because they do not have electricity or refrigerator. And she has shared these experiences with other people, and she has a reserve of preserved food when it comes to when there are weather related events. People can have access to this preserved food. She donates food to 6 families, and to other 40 families she sells these products at solidarity prices. And that woman lives in an area where there is no communication, in an isolated place. So this mapping included 10 initiatives and very interesting things that are being developed. The issue of community communication, when they have tried to work in the communities. When we sit at a table and we face problems, we realize that communication is still one of the major problems that we have, because the way in which it is translated, the intervention, still has a paternalistic approach. Sometimes people go to a community and they start working without knowing the community. So it's important that these things that are taking place in other contexts that are not urban contexts should also be known and disseminated, because the political sense that this has.
When your participation was quite important, since you have great knowledge about these new issues in communication in a general sense. I know some people shall go to that community, Kibihan, to show some of the experiences there. We were talking about the challenges that our revolution gives us as new opportunities, and we are lucky enough to have Judy Perez Martinez connected. I see him, but I don't know. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Judy, for being with us. He was with us since the first session of this forum, and he is with us again this afternoon. Well, I'll try to be brief. My greetings to everyone who has spoken before and to those who are connected. I just wanted to share with you some theses and some premises I wanted to defend here. I was listening to Gerardo, and that makes me think that we have to analyze everything related to participation in Cuba. And those are, they have a diagnosis by social sciences, done by social sciences and some other areas of scientific knowledge. And there are actions which are focused in solving the problems related to participation in Cuba. And today, we can visualize that through macro programs, guidelines, projects, programs, and a number of initiatives which are aimed to analyze in a multidisciplinary and comprehensive way the people's participation. I also think that the best way to generate the participation in Cuba is by promoting with new concepts of democracy. And when I say new concepts of democracy, I mean the analysis from the viewpoint of the society in construction with all the contrast it generates. And we are to understand that participation is to be contextualized in a society that is built in an alternative kind of society, in a society which is alternative to the capital, not only because of a rupture, which is so important, but also because of the importance it has to visualize socialism as a way to dignify human beings, not only from the material viewpoint, but also from the spiritual position. Participation might be achieved only if we include in a comprehensive way different sectors, and we need to understand that the best adjective of participation is people's participation, having the people participating with responsibility which is shared, co-responsibility. So when we analyze the demands and the needs of the citizens in Cuba, should not be a one-way need or a one-way position. The government might be not only associative, and the dynamic have to go in different ways, both ways, and this is a way to give and take. And we have to analyze how we participate, considering our individual prosperity, but also in the way to have this participation build the republic and the participation of everyone. In our constitutional design, it is said by many, we have potential to articulate the high levels of participation. However, we need to wonder ourselves what's happening with these instruments, with these ways of participation in the Cuban socialist practices, where we have some problems of lack of efficacy and efficiency. I consider myself that all this and it is crucial that we have to understand that socialism is not spontaneously reproducing some contexts, but we have to find different ways of people's participation in all the dimensions and in all territorial levels. With no doubt at all, this is an important element. I would like as well to highlight that there is a contradiction which is today present in Cuba, and that we should visualize that contradiction, and that is that today Cuba is in need of generating, in rebuilding, a permanent source of participation, a permanent source of construction of internal dialogues inside the Cuban citizenship, where to express the diversity of the Cuban citizenship, where to express the different lines of construction from the constitutional point of view. But this capacity of generating this participation, which is efficient and effective, is having a contradiction, and that is determined or posed by the capacity of unity in the face of the aggressive policy of the imperialism, which is cruelly seen in these conventional and non-conventional wars. So I consider that once again the blockade is to be considered, which is seen not only as a hurdle to the economic development of the country, but and this way to see all this, to analyze all this, made us think that this coercive and unilateral measures are to be eliminated. This blockade makes impossible to have a different kind of society, and of course magnifies and maximizes different mistakes of socialism. And that is something to consider, because we have the need to participate, to dialogue, and to do that with intelligence enough to be united. I believe unity in the present Cuba, it's important. That's something I wanted to take for reflection. It's urgent, considering the standard of participation of socialism in Cuba, to overcome this concept of participation as a form of an homogeneous practice conceived mainly about participation or limited dialogue. So participation cannot be standardized homogeneous practice. We need to have participation considering the specific role in different dynamics of the subjects, the workers in their places of work, the citizens in their meaning as political subjects, in people's consultations, in dynamics like participatory meetings, and this might happen according to the mechanisms of participations that exist. And many times we are not to wait from having some instructions from the leadership, but the citizens might have the possibility to have these participation scenarios. And I believe it's also important to try to overcome a trend which is in the institutional speech and in practices to take power in some entities and in some representative groups, and give some more and to eliminate the administrative characters of some institutions and organizations. For instance, in the municipalities, it's fundamental not only for the political system but also for the citizenship to understand that the municipal people's power assembly is the most important entity of the state in that context, and is empowered with the highest authority. And the relation of the municipal assembly with administration cannot be seen as horizontal work. It has to be analyzed as a going together kind of work. That municipal assembly is subordinated to the provincial one, which is also considering some important elements as the direct election of the president by the citizens. So it's fundamental to understand socialism from the daily point of view, and for that it's necessary to strengthen the democratic culture and give education for participation, but not thinking about ideals, but also to think about what we have, about tangible things. We have to make policy about not on ideals, but on practical terms, in the reality that shows where we have to interact, where to have more practices of participation, where we have to determine mechanisms which are not feasible, and to have the capacity to recognize all these elements. Participation should not be abstract, it should not be just an academic word. Just by saying participation, people should not be smiling about the idea of having participation. Participation is not a magic word. but is a functional element, is an element of democratic quality, and is also is an element of sustainability of socialism in Cuba. Among the elements that might generate a threat for socialism in Cuba, we can find the fact of non-considering participation as an element for democratic union. We are in the need to have a more democratic socialism, so we have to build the standards for democracy. So the citizenship, I have a fundamental element in this concern, and I also would like to mention some elements which are important at the time of creating a context for participation. I believe, which is crucial, is to understand who might participate, and then we speak about legitimacy considered as a system, not only from the formal or the material points of view, but from the critical one. We have the capacity, we need to have the capacity about the perception of the fair things about participation, the possibility of participation. Then we have to analyze the legal elements about this participation. Cuba is a country that have low standards of age for participation. Cubans might vote when they are 16, and because we have teenagers participating, we also have to reinforce that civilian culture and the public culture to be able to participate. We have to create not only a participation culture, but also a deliberation culture. And of course, participation considering peculiarities of each project and dynamics inserted in society. The transversal participation element is why participating, and then we have to consider not only values, as Joel said, and positive elements as the phenomena of reality, but we have also to consider some elements of reality which are to be included in the movements and actions executed by individuals. And it's also urgent, in my belief, to know which are the motivations of the Cuban citizens to participate and to be able to build and to contribute with that consensus. And then we are also in the need to differentiate spaces and possibilities. We have to see where the debates are taking places. If in the CDRs or in some other specific contexts. You have taken too much time, and we like what you're saying, but I didn't know how to make you notice that you are taking most of the time that was given to you. That was the way we found. Later, I believe we shall have the opportunity in the debates to be able to give more elements about your assessments about participation from the legal viewpoint and about more specialized issues which are part of these topics and education issues. We have also Manolo de los Santos from the People's Forum, who has been one way or another supporting because he has great knowledge about Cuba and about this important battle against the blockade, and about the analysis they make from the United States. Unfortunately, most of this information it's viral, not even when it is based on wrong information. So some friends from Solidarity decided to change that fake image in the midst of Let's Cuba Live, Dejen a Cuba Vivir, and it's important to have this participation. So, Manolo, how do you see all this Cuban reality from the viewpoint of the organizations where you are daily participating?
Bueno, un fuerte saludo y
Well, greetings to all people in Cuba and those who are listening to us. To me, it is an honor to be together with so many people who are considered my heroes, my teachers, my mentors. So just after listening to this panel, I've learned a lot. And I have been nourished out of the urgent challenges, present challenges that you face in Cuba, but very rarely discussed in this field of solidarity. I wish you can replicate this experience. I'm sure that many other people have to listen to these debates, this critical perspective from Cuba and also from a revolutionary outlook. I think that a starting point for me, and I say to me and also to a generation of comrades who are emerging within the political movements and social movements in the United States, our starting point is not only solidarity with Cuba from a nostalgic approach, but what has been reached and built within the revolution. It seems to me that we have come to appreciate Cuba because it's not a finished project, because we see this as a process, because we see there are many things remaining. We do not ignore the challenges faced by Cuba. We do not ignore that people has to do a lot to do racism, xenophobia. We do not ignore that in Cuba there are still elements of social injustice. But still, we persist because we see the level of hybrid war that persists from the United States, the hybrid war at its full sense of the very government of the United States, the one that is oppressing and exploiting us here. They insist in all possible ways not only to defeat the Cuban Revolution, but also they state the need to defeat the Cuban people and the country project or the future project that Cuba has. We have been taking a look at this after what happened on July 11th, how all of a sudden, not only from the government, but from the influencers, the corporate media and the United States social media, all of a sudden there is a sudden interest on Cuba's problems. All of a sudden there is a huge interest on the need to solve Cuba's problems, not only from the humanitarian standpoint, but right now we have to solve racism in Cuba, xenophobia, housing problems in Cuba. So this youth segment within solidarity with Cuba, we think that once again we bet on the defense of the idea and the future and the potential of Cuba. And together with Cuba, we want to dream about a different reality for the planet. The current reality is not perfect in Cuba, and we think that on the contrary, Cuba has the right to defend this futuristic idea, this country project. We believe that Cuba has the right to defend the capacities and possibilities to make mistakes. They have the right to do this and to perfect this, and they have the right to defend that everything cannot be solved, and there are still many things to be solved. The right to experiment, to create, to innovate, and a new way to organize the society. I think we commit to that. That's why the message that we want to convey about let Cuba live is not only long live Cuba because they have a health system or because they have educated thousands of people, not because everything they have accomplished, but just let Cuba live so that they continue creating and innovating. Let Cuba live so there can be a future in Cuba, so that they can be a source of inspiration not only for the Cuban youth, but also for world youth to fight. We assume that Cuba is not a model for all peoples in struggle in the world, but this is still a source of inspiration to create the world that we want. I believe, not to take more time, we have also faced a very interesting situation because we have seen the reactions of these groups that now they're very much interested in the future of Cuba and the problems of Cuba. Those who criticize this statement by Black Lives Matters, they are the big anti-racists in the world. But we know them here. We've seen them in action and taking the floor here. And likewise, they attack Cuba. They're the most reactionary forces in all political processes that take place within the United States. We see that those who attack us because we defend Cuba, they attack us with the same discourses, homophobic, racist discourses of the ultra-right wing of the United States. That's why we have seen that the correlation of forces is pushing us to defend Cuba, not only because of the fact that we defend Cuba, because Cuba is good, or because the revolution is good, but because of our interests are in line to create a better world, a new world, and that new world has to have a name and a surname, and we're calling it socialism. We have the need to push and to defend that. Lastly, once again, not to take more time, because I think what has been said before has been of greater value by the comrades of Cuba, but I think it's part of the call, urgent call, I would say, not only to stand in solidarity, not only to those who are considered to be friends of Cuba, but to a new generation of people's movements, of political processes in both sides, to get closer to Cuba, to learn, to listen to these rich debates, and again to engage in their defense as the defense of what is possible, of what is needed, of the future project of humanity. It seems to me that I would like to stop here. We shall continue to defend Cuba against all the forms of aggression against Cuba, against the blockade, but we want to insist on the fact that we have to engage on new relations, new bonds with the Cuban people that can enable us to create this new world on a joint basis. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here with our friends from Martin Luther King Center, who have been our teachers in essence in this process to rethink and reorganize the political work, leaving behind dogmas and sectarism. And therefore, I would like to thank them for this opportunity and also the possibility to continue working together. Thank you.
Manolo.
Thanks, Manolo, for your daily work. And for the words about Cuba, while saying that Cuba is not perfect, of course, we are a model which is working for social justice and for changing everything that is to be changed. But it's not. In the media agenda, all these encounters have been taking place just to put into debate all this reality and to speak about new arguments about present Cuba. There are some greetings from the Carioca or Puerto Rico Solidarity with Cuba group and the work done by Chema Sanchez. We have some contact from Pinar del Rio, from the province of Buenos Aires, from Remedios, Cuba, from the network of people's educators, Red de Educadores Populares, in Baracoa, Guantanamo, persons linked to the experience. We have in different provinces, in Yayamo, in the Vancouver group of Solidarity with Cuba. We have a question by someone named Castellano. part of the strategy of revolution is using artists as an international campaign to victimize alleged artists and violating their rights. These actions are what actions are taken to counteract these kind of campaigns against artists? There is another question for you, Joel, which is published in Casa de las Américas Facebook. How can social networks contribute to the position of church, and in how to eliminate this discredit of the events of July 11th? There is a question by Geraldine Clotti. She says, as we see with Sun Tzu, imperialism targets young people. What is happening with some sectors of youth? How many of these young people are present in this cultural sector that Joel was mentioning when quoting Martínez Heredia, and which is the bourgeois position while using culture? Can you please give the link of the different groups? A greeting from the International Network with Solidarity with Cuba from the United States, and a comment from Angel Guerras about how this work in the neighborhoods, in the communities, has been focused in the last times in vulnerable neighborhoods after July 11th. There is a new working experience in the neighborhoods in Cuba, and it's important to say that this is also taken to some other places. We have a round of questions and answers, so we have less time now. Just taking the last question. In my personal opinion, I think it's not so important to, if we begin now or we are going to the neighborhoods now, or if we went before. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone, but if you go to my Facebook page or my Facebook site, you can see I went to San Isidro, I went to San Pedrito in Guantánamo, in Ho Chi Minh in Guantánamo, even before July 11th, even in previous years. It's something I tried to do before. Of course, this force, this strength, and this campaign of putting our heart in the neighborhoods started now. But this is a suggestion of the population. If the people is saying that something is wrong, if there are problems in some place, we have to take care of those problems. And I believe that more than a reason to be criticized, or more than something that can be criticized, is something to be highlighted, because we indeed are going to the neighborhood, no matter if it is happening after or before July the 11th. And something that Manolo said, and I say that in a brief manner, Manolo said that many of those who are trying to raise a flag of anti-racism or anti-homophobic flag are the same ones that in the United States support any reactionary cause. And that took me to the years in which I lived in the United States during the 1990s. And in the case of Miami, the anti-Cuba campaigns were listened to in the Miami radio stations. I'm speaking about stations like Radio Mambi, 7 days AM, 24 hours, broadcasting propaganda against Cuba, speaking about human rights violation in Cuba, and all that. And they used to say, today is a special day because we are visited by Patricia Pinochet, the daughter of Augusto Pinochet. And then they were talking all the time, and I swear, yes, they were talking for a whole hour about the good things about Pinochet's regime. And in the case of artists, you take my phone, you see the number of some of them in my phone because we are friends who have been taking pictures of us together. But these same people who are talking about freedom and diversity in Cuba, they have a code to be able to be accepted, to be defined. It's about the way they call themselves. For them to be able to live in the United States, they have to be given very specific responses, and the more revolutionary participation they had in Cuba, the more they are to speak bad things about Cuba. So we have monsters in music like Arturo Sandoval, who used to be, in my opinion, almost a fascist. He was a member of the party, Communist Party in Cuba. He used to travel in the world, and he had some pictures taken with Fidel Castro. And for him to be forgiven for that, he had to speak very, very nasty things about Cuba. And that is what is happening with artists. People who were living in Cuba and saying, thanks, President, for being in my concert. And, when they go to the States, and when these videos of their concerts were seen in the United States, now they have to change, and they have to be very cruel in the manner they refer to Cuba. So if you have, let's say, an Audi, what kind of equity you're talking about? The rest of the people, ask Manolo if he has a car, which is an Audi, and you have to see one of the tweets that was very famous about Alejandro Sanz. He said that the Cuban Revolution is wrong and all these bad things about the revolution. And then he was supposed to say something about the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista, but he cannot say anything about that because those controlling the cultural means are descendant from Batista, and he cannot speak bad, he cannot say wrong things about Batista. And those artists who leave Cuba and they speak about the freedom of expression in Cuba, they can say anything about the Cuban Revolution, but they cannot say anything against the blockade. They cannot speak bad about the blockade. And they say, I came to the United States trying to be free, and I would like to send money, as Mexicans do, to my country, but the blockade is not stopping me from doing that, but the government. So they say they wanted to live in the States. Most of them were white, as they said many years ago, and the CIA is not working with reduced budget. So they realized that they needed to find some Negro people, some Negro artists, animalists, environmental people, trying to turn many people against the Cuban Revolution. But if you want to try who are concerned about the freedom of expression, you have to go to Miami and see in what news program they are saying wrong things about the blockade, or they say just something like, if we are the free country in the world, why I'm not allowed to smoke a cohiba, or why I'm not allowed to buy Santiago rum in Miami. So they need to be brave enough to have that freedom of expression they want for Cuba.
Heidi.
Thank you, Gerardo. Heidi, two comments, because I was inspired by the words of Manolo. I began to think about two things. One is the freedom of speech. I always wonder up to or how far when people take advantage of all opportunities in our society to express ourselves, not only as artists or economic or political subjects, in all dimensions of human beings. And when we look at these spaces, we realize that based on our studies also, many of these spaces are not even used for people to express themselves, but something else. is related to the fact after several years I've been working with the issues of inequality. I express in these studies and here in Cuba we cannot talk about no, we honestly speak this and we bring to different spaces because as a subject I'm committed to these issues. And I go to the places that are designed for that, and there are so many, not only to express this, but also to participate in the solution to these problems. And quite often, these are issues that, to me, as a young woman, I feel connected to this project because I see there are countless opportunities of participation as a political subject. I can dream to becoming classical things that could be in a life project, but I see a horizon opportunity as the realization of a human being, the different spaces, the world I feel when I participate in the red of people's educators or when I engage with the youth in my neighborhood to devise a community project, this possibility to explore and rethink. And I leave the process of the Cuban Revolution as a social laboratory to see how far we can go when it comes to human innovation, to look for emancipation. So I feel that horizon of unlimited possibilities. And the other thing I wanted to refer to has to do with community work. And they say that community work started short ago. But when I decided to choose for my research topic, we chose inequality, but also how we organize ourselves to work with inequality, to manage solutions for inequalities. And I love to choose this other look that enabled me to approach this topic, but also see how human creativity is deployed to take into account these kind of elements. And I felt passionate because I toured different communities, both rural and urban. I loved the speaker's intervention who talked about this. I went to Baracoa, Loma del Chivo, in Quemado de Huines, Huira de Melena, Aguada de Pasajeros, and other communities. And we see a deployment of creativity by humans to look for solutions for different issues caused by inequalities. It's true, we had not reached everything we wanted to, but it has to do with learning communities, gathering tables, and you're also invited, and the FMC is invited, because in these spaces, and what we find is a lot of diversity. In the 6 municipalities that I visited, in 5-6 years, we were able to conduct an inventory of 154 actions to take into account or to tackle many inequalities. And this is conducted by public policy. In public policies, can get a feedback from these policies. We're saying that we have a horizon for innovation to tackle inequalities. That this scenario of creativity and also to rethink how we can give a response to these issues. Thank you, Haiti. Pedro. Greetings. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, go ahead. Greetings to Guerrita, who posted one of the comments that you shared with us. Guerrita, thank you for allowing me to publish in the Bohemia magazine. A while ago, we were referring to articulation between the community and the media, between these two fields, because it's been done for a long time, these interventions, community participation. Intervention is not the word, but the social work at the community level. And it's a long-standing work. In the most difficult year of the social period, in '94, in UNIAC, someone who is in this room also knows, at a time, a critical time, there was no paper to publish books. Theater was highly depressed. transportation was worse than now. In the 94, 95, there were huge blackouts for many hours, and we had just a few hours of light. I have to refer to UNIAC. We emerged a community movement and a movement for communicators or coordinators at the community level. And it's composed by many artists where they reside. They have fostered different ways of people's participation, not only tackle artistic or literary issues, but they include environmental dimensions, even economic and productive dimensions, and is still preserved. A while ago, the Minister of Culture, Mr. Alonso, met with 40 representatives of different cultural and community initiatives, but many of them, I realize, who have been working for many years before. The 11th of July is not a turning point in the Cuban Revolution. When it comes to cultural work, it has been developed for many years, not only in Havana, but throughout the country. The Jar of Pellegrin in Penal del Rio province, what El Mejunje in Santa Clara province is being made. They're taking food and inputs to people who are sick, people who have had losses as a result of COVID. Even in Havana, the president was there, but long before they were working, they have been working there for years. It is true that we have to articulate the media field with the community to let people know about this, but this is not something recent. I can swear that it has been present long before. And the only thing I wanted to say, freedom of speech. In Cuba, people talk about everything. You have to be present in a forum of UNIAC. People talk about things. I'm based on my own experience, my personal experience. In the UNIAC, in the Union of Writers and Artists of Cuba, in the discussion forum, they discuss anything they want. People who are making jokes. And someone said, I oppose. And then he said, what is it about? So, and lastly, I wanted to talk, someone talked about this before. Someone from Argentina. They talked about the music and the youth. The hegemonic industry is designed in such a way and has such a power that they distort and impose likes, some good, but mostly bad likes. This is not the case, but I would like to discuss how, the dissemination of a notion that is totally distorted, that is urban music. Urban music is the one that is made in the cities, but they have imposed a pattern of urban music, and it's not only musicians the one who have imposed this. Famous Cuban musician said, I have to study 12 years in a music school to master this. It's a famous Cuban musician who also makes Cuban music, and I was able to master many structures. And so that someone comes now, says that you don't have to be a musician to say 3 or 4 things. And this is not the case of the great musician and the great opportunistic Gerardo referred to, but I'm talking about lousy musicians who support someone. What Jose Martí said, that fame and wisdom do not go together. I can be very famous, but I can have zero talent. And so far, most expressions have come from many Maidraki people, from people who are not artists. I have to see this, of course. The true talents expressed freely in Cuba or outside Cuba, but with Cuban feeling. And I challenge anyone else to prove otherwise.
Joel.
Thanks, Pedro. Joel, you've got the floor. There is a complex question for the panel, which is the role play at the church in all this context. And I just wanted to say that this religious field, as any other field in society, has the same conflicts and problems. There is the church here representing all the independence, patriotic feelings of the population in Cuba, and there is a growth in a notorious way of a religious fundamentalism with a political agenda that, as it was said in the question, has been present in a critical manner in facing the revolution, in challenging the revolution, is a matter we have to take care of. We have to analyze. Religion is not a simple thing in the daily life of the population, but this matter goes beyond this panel, the time of this panel. First, we were talking about the freedom of speech, and Hades was speaking about this, and I also would like to talk about the limits of freedom of speech. There is a phrase that says that neoliberalism is the reality of half-truths, and that is indeed, this concept is half true, because I guarantee the freedom of speech, but also I have to see who is guaranteeing this right. I can be talking about anything in the world. I can talk about being exploited in my place of work, or anything, how my rights are violated, but who guarantees me that someone is listening to my statements? Important thing, apart from this freedom of speech, there is also an important issue that it's indeed that you have the right to be listened to. There is a political willingness in the country to go more and more dealing with this, the right moment to give this freedom to widen this freedom of speech. But defending the right of freedom of speech is all the time, if that freedom of speech is aggressive or undermining the rights of others, that's not good. And this fundamentalist religious context is asking for spaces in the means of communication. We have hegemonic means of communication as television and radio. If I were in that position, I wouldn't give the opportunity to anti-right-wing people to speak about ideology, or to speak about gender issues, or to speak about sexual education, which is also so necessary. And I'm not going to give the opportunity to this kind of against right-wing people to speak bad about the government. So I have to see, as mass media, who I give the opportunity to talk and to have this freedom of speech. Socialist press have the challenge to build and to have this hegemonic nature, and to have human beings as a center of reproduction, material and spiritual reproduction of life, but not the market. So capitalism denies rights, and imperialism is a deformation, misformation of the empowerment of some potentials. So we have to analyze where, when, give space to these kind of people to speak about freedom of speech. The role played by youth, I just wanted to say that young people, youth, is facing all the time something which is not oftenly mentioned. And that is that many of the comments are used to speak about senior citizens. And this, Joel and I, we were talking about the fact that some student from senior high school was talking about the responsibility he had in society. He said he was old enough to have criteria and to have opinions about some political issues and political spaces in our schools and in our communities, which might be organized by political organizations, has been deteriorated, and we have to take back to rescue the participation of young people while talking about political issues. That's something we used to do, but we are not doing anymore. So we have to retake that possibility of talking to young people to know how they are having these emancipatory kind of feelings. So there are things also they would like to discuss with the government, like homophobia or macho man positions, which is something present even in academic institutions. And it's important as well to start once for all to stop being afraid of young organizations and emerging groups, as the case of urban tribes or the assimilation of Korean culture like K-pop, and to live with these emerging groups and to start analyzing the viewpoints of young people, let them participate in some specific processes. And some of them are, have a political point of view, like topics like animalism or feminism, but and also about issues related to LGBT community. So I believe that recognizing some other identities, not to fade them, but working with them, it's also some important matter to be able to have the youth in our side, and they just want to have the spaces to be able to take the floor. Thanks, Julie. I just wanted to say something. When we talk about freedom, I would like to mention Marinello. He said exercising freedom means responsibility.
Well, Judy. Yes. I'll try not to speak that long this time. Yes, democracy cannot be understood as an ideal space, and of course with contradictions. A while ago, during an interview, I said something similar. Cuba has proven is not as a manifestation of the exercise of freedom of speech, of certain individual liberties. Understanding this in this individualistic logic, and many people buy this, is to be held hostage of something that puts aside a number of political, economic, social, ideological, religious variables that are present in one place at a given historical time. This reductionism presents as valid the coexistence in a single state and a single subject of aims that are by nature antagonic. It is incompatible that the same subject in the same country is asking freedom, and on the other side, military intervention that is opposed or incompatible because they are contrary to the social meaning that for Cubans freedom has, or the assessments that Cubans make about any bellic war-like conflict. And the meaning of war for Cuba, it is not implied, unfortunately, that they are presented in the social media as compatible with the discourse that is promoted from the media power centers. And it is important to understand that it is important and needed to work not only from the standpoint of the media, the social media, but how the political discourse is built. In no place in the world freedoms are limited. In order to have a fair social order, it is important that these liberties are censored in the face of collective freedom. That's why Article 45 of the Cuban Constitution states that rights that are not absolute, that are limited by these elements. What should be these guarantees? First, that the boundaries do not affect the dignity of human people. Article 40 of the Constitution stating that the dignity is the supreme value of all rights. And secondly, there have to be a previous regulation of the limit. You cannot establish the limit afterwards, but they have to be made beforehand. So I think there are many opinion matrices that present rights as a limit, what in fact they're not. And for that, we have to highlight every day the democratic culture from an innovation system to participate in. And I think that all technology, civic technology, plays a key role so that teenagers and adults can also be inserted in these dynamics of participation. Thank you, Jude. Manolo, are you with us? I don't see Manolo is online. Before I give the floor to Guerrita, I think Carlito can open the chat because there are other comments that I would like to read as well. Please, can you do that?
A partir del minuto, ok. Sí, no, de 10:16. Bueno, close su.
Well, I know Cuban experience for over 20 years with the Martin Luke Centers, with the UNIAC, with the Felix Barlera Center. Rogelio Molanco was ambassador to Venezuela, and the imperialist is trying to impose the same script against Venezuela with the Guarimbas and the states under control. You see people in the European Union and are trying to have an alleged parallel government. So how concrete this danger is? Polo Castellanos, part of the cultural war is in the conceptual definition of cultural trends. So there's a group of new organizations working with different topics: race, youth, women, religion, others. What's the contribution by these new organizations? So the Organization of People's Power in Cuba. How do you assess the role of people's power? The whole world has the agenda of freedom of speech. Many people take a liberal approach and the responsibility of freedom of speech. That person is wondering. Nothing happens with those responsible for fake news. I give the floor to Guerrita. If there's any other person who would like to take the floor, please ask for the floor in this chat. Guerrita, you have the floor. I don't think it's the right time, but I want to say that I felt very good, very much encouraged by a very rich debate with very important contributions, including Gerardo and the last contribution by the last speaker, including a number of young men and women I don't have the pleasure to know, but they have awakened my admiration. I didn't have the honor to be with Gerardo. He and Ramon Lavallino are two of our 5 here that I haven't had the chance to meet. And I have been also very much encouraged to listen to him. I've been tracking him down as a coordinator of the CDRs every time I can. But it seems to me that the famous website, as it has been done over the last few times, it should be, this activity should be made more visible, his work in the neighborhoods, because I think it's very important. I'm very pleased to be here with Pedro de Laos. I published his work in Bohemia. We published in the Bohemian magazine, not only me, all there in the magazine acknowledged he was a young learner. He was very promising, and he had many things to say. And we have to read the article at the time, how this young journalist was already writing outstanding articles, and he was very witty, and he showed great professionalism for his own age. That was not common. And you said something, Pedro. It's true. It is 11 July is not a turning point, but I think what is important, it has been said, I'm not going to say something new. It seems very important to insist on the fact that 11th of July is the consequence of years of work of the enemy to lead to the overthrow of the Cuban Revolution and its government and its leadership. And apart from that, this is the expression of the reinforced blockade with great cruelty during the pandemic. We threw 143 measures. I'm not repeating these, but we have to say this over and over again. The 40 measures they made during the very pandemic. We were included in the list of states sponsoring terrorism, knowing that this caused an additional damage. I think is what I think is important to rescue. On the one hand, from the standpoint of the enemy, that is something that is very important, and to explain this to so many people in the world, that unfortunately they get a narration about this that is totally false. The other thing that I think is very important is that on the 11th of July, there were also claims, as President Díaz-Canel said, there were legitimate claims. Those claims are being taken care of, and we have been taking care of that, and we have engaged in dialogue with the population as it is seen in no other place in the world. In what country in the world the President goes to San Antonio, the town of San Antonio, after the protest, and to talk to people? This is an example of an acting democracy, as all the statements that have been made here today. So I feel very much encouraged, and I want to thank you all for being here. I would like you to share the names of comrades who have been making their these courses and the organizations and programs they belong to, where they're involved, just to me, so that I can write about what I'm witnessing today. I think this is very important.
Gracias, Garrita.
Thanks, Garrita. I don't know if somebody else would like to talk here. Yes, from Greece. We have been created for 3 months now, and I just wanted to share some experience from the other side of the world. You remember the Arab Spring, and that was related to freedom of speech in Libya, in Syria, and I'm not talking about socialist countries. I'm talking about countries who were outside the framework bench of the imperialism. They have problems and maybe mistakes, but when the imperialism used the pretext of taking freedom with war, with destruction, with bombing. And what happened in those countries, especially in Libya, which is very close to Greece? More than 500,000 people left Libya. That turned into a feudalist country where American and European companies controlling oil are back, and they also have some tribes and leaders under their control. That was a country totally destroyed. When imperialism speaks about freedom of speech, they are trying to invent, to make up these stories which are total destruction. And consider that the Cuban Revolution, with all the problems it might have, which have been mentioned in an enthusiastic way to rectify socialism, which is human socialism, but it's not perfect. Indeed, it's human, and that is important. And this is the example we were able to see today. That's why I would like to deeply thank you from Greece, because you were talking about a reality in Cuba, about to the other side of the world, in Europe, and about the way you have been working doing good and wrong things. But indeed, you are defending that, certain that you are defending the future of the people of Cuba. Thanks. Thank you very much, Costas. And Costas Asikos from Greece is the coordinator of the Greece chapter of the Network in Defense of Humanity. They have been, he has been doing a great work in this intellectuals network, and I would like to thank you for being with us and giving this testimony from that other side of the world. I don't know if anyone else is asking for the opportunity to talk. Someone from Casa de las Américas Facebook said this can be a collective expression, and in the media we need to see the expressions of the people's organizations, no matter which they are. Thanks, and my greetings from Uruguay. A final idea from the members of the panel. Gerardo, this idea from my responsibility of national coordinator of city arts, and I've been in different parts, in different parts of the conversation have been mentioned. Let me tell you that we are celebrating 61 years of our organization, and we know the need to give a turn to the organization to change the way of working. Cuba in 2021 is not the same country from the year 1960 when this organization was created, even if we are following the same purpose, which is defending the revolution from our communities. So we have to rethink our way of working. We have to get adapted to new times, and then we are working precisely with the participation of science and experts like Judy and some other comrades that with great work in community work are also contributing with us, and they are committed to work with us to get closer to real problems in communities. And CDRs might respond to this vital question: what is CDR? What is a CDR today? And at the same time, that the population might have the answer when they ask themselves, what am I supposed to be given? And this is a way to get closer to present problems. Heidi from Glaxo. Heidi Fundora from Glaxo. As a final comment, where is the participation of all these emerging youth? And I would like just to mention one example. I'm part of a feminist group, Berta Cáceres, and we are participating in different projects. And I'm part as well of People's Educators Network, and I represent the participation of Afro women in different programs for transforming racial manifestations. We can see that young people are part of those same spaces. I'm also a member of ACDR and member of the Cuban Women's Federation, and we, as I say, we are participating in different processes and having dialogue in different processes. And as I said before, I place my hope in a renovation of the working experiences in community that have been done for many years now, but also in the spaces, in the projects that are created now, which were out of the public policies, and now they are important platforms of participation, of unity, considering the commitment we have with the socialist process. Pedro de la Hoz, Vice President of the Union of Writers and Artists of Cuba, and heading the Comisión Aponte against racism. Yes, just few words. Working enhances people, and we are to work. I'll never be tired of working for a better future, which is not an utopia. It's a possible utopia which is present in our country. And second thing is that with this panel and my participation, I say that for the first time on August the 31st, we are celebrating for the first time the Day of the Afro-Descendant. We in Cuba are Afro-Latin Caribbean country, and also descending from Africa. This is a cultural legacy more than a skin color.
Joel Suarez, social activist, executive coordinator from the Martin Luther King Jr. Center. I'm a believer. I believe in God. I have never seen him, and sometimes he does not answer when I call him. Living in this country, mostly at times of pandemic, in the exercise and the faces of solidarity that I've seen every day, I've seen the face of God. And even the horrible anguish, I mean, when there are no medication, when something is lacking, is still something, a great joy to me, and a great hope in this, because this revolution has the capacity to reinvent itself. Claudia Rafael Albertis, journalist, member of the network EDH. I would like to get back to the words by Marcelo, who posed a question, who was quite complex. I think is perhaps a continuity for our upcoming panel, how these new struggles that could deepen socialism could, in a way, can foster and promote people's power. That is, they do that in a great deal. So I'd like to thank Marcelo for that question. And lastly, in line with my previous speaker said in the last address, when I, with Lilian Gordillo, said something beautiful as to how these people has to be respected, be great deal, because after so many years of enduring and reinvent themselves, we deserve victory. Thank you, Claudia. Jury Perez Martinez from the Union of Jurists of Cuba. Just to say, we have to be true to the essence of nature of our system. I think the best formula to define ourselves have to be that the state owes to the people's power. We have to defend the socialist state of law and social justice. We can never forget social justice, where we can maximize the prevalence of the Constitution. A Constitution is not the result of the work of a few, but rather of work of many, where rights and liberties of citizens are respected, but we exercise also the fulfillment of duties that is so important for the exercise of democracy. And of course, in an environment of equality without discrimination, and in an environment where we can interact, humans and nature, I think is vital in this world that we have today. It seems to me that in the end, history will prove us right, because being on the side of the people's power is very significant. Thank you. Thank you, Yuri. Well, Manolo de los Santos was with us. He also participated in this. I would like to thank all the members of the panel, all who have been following this cycle since the 17th that we started. There are standing questions that we should have to respond to in a different format. We should have to give continuity to this space, not perhaps with panels, but with the interviews. I think it will be important, but I would like to thank all the organizations who have helped us to make this happen. I'd like to say to convey these debates from Cuba Revolucionaria today. The Union of Journalists of Cuba, the Union of Writers and Artists of Cuba, the National Association of Accountants, the Network in Defense of Humanity, Martin Luther King Centers, Resumen Latinoamericano, the Union of Jurists of Cuba, the People's Forum, organizations in the United States who have been receiving this broadcasting in English, Cuba Debate, who has been also supporting this broadcasting, the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples. So it's a wide range, numerous group of organizations, also the civil society who have participated in this. And we end today with footage, just 10 minutes, one of the most extensive, but it bear witness of the meeting of Fray Beto in a community, in a neighborhood in Bayamo, that is so important for Cuba, for the nationality of Cuba. And what Fray Beto said at the time to that community is still present today. And with this, we say goodbye. I would like to thank you all. Thank you for your time, and we would like to share with you with this footage.
Ustedes tienen.
You have in your hands different tools of people's power. You have the zone groups, the association of small agricultural producers, pedagogic personnel, university staff, peasants, people in sugar factories. So there is a big number of tools and of parts of a social network that constitute the people's power. And the question is, are you still having a position, subversive position, of waiting for things to come from up to down, or are we where that a real revolution cannot be a weak revolution. A wig is something you place in your head from top down to hide that you have no hair or to cover your white hair. The revolution has to be a hair growing from the roots, or because the government, any government, works only with few things. If you have only you have beans, you have to cook in the pressure cooker. Same thing happens if the government have no pressure from the masses, they are doing nothing. If we are just waiting and not acting, that's not good. We have to make the dreams true. So I hope that one day you might have an answer of the many questions asked by the lady who asked many questions before, and we just met at this meeting. We didn't meet before. We didn't meet before. You have a lot of credits. Has elapsed almost 60 years of the revolution. These children here, many of them, will now be taking drugs from one mountain to another, not going to school. Many of them would be 12, 13 years of age, just trafficking with drugs, but also not only trafficking with drugs, but also consuming drugs. Many of the girls here might be prostitutes, that it's happening in Brazil. So many of the people here, me myself, for instance, in Bayamo, no same family, which is in the streets. I have not seen women sleeping in the squares and in the parks with their children, unprotected, having no food, depending on public charity or in people that give them some money to buy food. Or I have not seen people asking for food for themselves. But many times, people showing solidarity with Cuba were concerned in Latin America, for instance, about those facts. Some people, unfortunately, even Cuban, compare Cuba not only to Latin American countries, but also to the United States. While the matrix of development for us is that consumption society, that oppressive society of the United States, who is able to make this kind of comparison might be having the wrong answer, because happiness does not depend on having electrical appliances, electronic things, or cars, or houses with swimming pools. That is an illusion that are given by Hollywood films for us to stop being citizens and start being consumption persons. Happiness lies in a simple life in which feelings are shared with love, in which assets are shared with love. For instance, an example, they don't feel envy for the life we have. We are, for them, indigenous who live in tribes. They don't have, those tribes have no technology as we have, as the people who live in the Amazon area in Brazil, and they are happy because a child is a child not only of his or her parents, but is a child of the community, and they have seen the fragile points of life, and they own time. We all have a watch in our wrists, and we have the cuff of time in our hands, you know. Perhaps in Holguín you're saying Frei Beto is talking too much and it's taking too much of our time. Probably you're thinking that, but they are not. In the Amazons, the tribes are not owners of their times. They don't need to gather many assets as people do in capitalism, because just to have a fish, they don't need to use refrigerators to put more fish in the fridge. Just go to the river and fish some fishes, and that's it. That's what they do. They are in total contact with nature, and nature can live without us. That has happened for millions and millions of years. Human beings are degrading nature, but we cannot live without nature. There is no way to live without nature, in contact with nature. So, in this revolution, you must be proud of this revolution. You have many reasons for being proud. And also the historical meaning of the Cuban Revolution, with its roots, its origin, which is called José Martí, with its guide, who is Fidel Castro, with the present commander, who is Raúl Castro, and so many other revolutionary men and women that in daily life, in an anonymous way, give love to this cause. And perhaps one of the most important credits is having this kind of people. United States, which is so close to your country, and we in Brazil, fortunately, are far from the United States. But you are very close to the States. This country, I mean, the United States have invaded Iraq, they have invaded Afghanistan, they have invaded Libya, and now they are invading Syria. Why are they not attacking Cuba? Yes, right. You know the answer. You know the answer to that question. Because in all the countries I just mentioned here, they were trying to defeat a government, and that is easy. But what is not easy is to put down the whole people, the whole country, and they know they have to face the whole population of this country. And they know, and they have learned with the lessons taken from the Bay of Pigs battle, and they know people cannot be defeated. Thank you very much.